Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when people are listening. I'm excited to be back again today for another episode of the Thriving in Intersectionality podcast. And before I bring in my guest, of course, if this is your first time coming into this space, I would love to share a little bit about that word, intersectionality. I came into that word a while back, and I had to remind myself that not everybody is as familiar with the word. And so it's always important to set the stage with that. What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a framework. And I came through this through the work of Kimberly Crenshaw. And I love that she defined it using the word framework. Because it's a lens, it's a language that helps us perceive things. It recognizes our multiple aspects of identity, such as gender, race, ethnicity, immigration class status, and class, among so many other categories. How all of these things overlap and interact, and they create unique experiences of privilege or discrimination that you can't understand by examining just a single one of these factors in isolation. This framework helps us explore leadership, not just as skills and strategies, but as something that is deeply shaped by our identity and lived experiences and also gives us context. And so I love to bring guests that bring a whole range of intersections, and then we talk through how they've seen this show up in their leadership styles. So my guest today is Adriana. Hi, Adriana Vaccaro. Hi.
Hi, Dr. Lola. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to jump in. But first, I would like to give my audience a little bit about you. And of course, they can find your full bio in the show note at the end of the conversation. But just a little bit about who Adriana is. Adriana Vaccaro is an award winning entrepreneur, organizational culture strategist, and a best selling author dedicated to transforming the way we work by centering people, purpose, and performance. She's originally from Bogotá, Colombia, and her personal journey reflects resilience, vision, and a deep commitment to building workplaces where humanity and strategy coexist. She has over 15 years of experience across human resources, organizational development, and process improvement, and helps organizations align people practices with business goals. Our work bridges behavioral science, data, and culture change, guiding leaders through complex transformations that elevate trust, collaboration, and inclusion. Adriana is the founder and CEO of Culture Redesigned, a consulting firm that partners with mission driven organizations to build cultures of belonging and innovation. And I'm excited to jump into our background and maybe a little bit about our work because I can already tell our work sort of intersects with what I do. And but I want to go backward first and learn to know a little bit more about you, Adriana. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. And I love I love to start with my intersectionality and my way of identifying myself. Like you said, I'm a woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a mother, and I feel like each part of my identity gives me a different lens and a different experience. It also gives me a sense of power and privilege in so many ways. But in a way, it also gives me a way of connecting with others because I do understand how one part of your identity might affect drastically some parts of your life. In my example, being an immigrant and being a woman of color, starting a business in Massachusetts. It has some challenges, of course, but it also allows me to not compare my journey to someone else's journey if we don't have the same identity. It's a completely different journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to remind myself that too a lot of times because I remember writing my book and doing book launch and just thinking of the communities that some of my friends that were writing at the same time that just had their plugged in community to do their book campaign. And that was my first realization like, oh my gosh, even though we're at this phase of life together, we don't have the same experiences backing us up. And that's
Absolutely. Yes. When you mentioned book launch, and I relate to that comment because I wrote my book with a cohort as well. And I could see how their experience getting book ambassadors and getting, a ton of people to buy 10 copies of their book, was it looked in a way to me that, like, oh my gosh, how are they doing all of this? But I have 3 sons, and my oldest is 18, and I know if in 10 years he decides to write a book, he went to school here, he's going to go to
Yeah.
college here, he's going to look completely different. So I have to give myself grace and understand that is my journey, is the journey of an immigrant. But it doesn't mean it's better or worse, it's just different.
It's just different, exactly, and that's it. So, is there any other, when you think of intersectionality, is there anything else you want to add to that as far as any of your identity categories that have shaped your leadership journey?
I think as a Latina, there is something I've learned in terms of developing my own leadership style, and it involves unlearning. In our culture, we tend to be really collectivist. Like if in the workplace, you do your work, and people are supposed to notice, and they're supposed to help you elevate yourself. And I think when I started my corporate career in the US, I was kind of like following that cultural, what I knew, right? I just have to keep my head down, do my job. If the quality of my job is good, the quality of my work is good, I will see those promotions and the raises and whatever else. And I have learned that in the US it's a little more individualistic. So I have had to learn to use my voice and say, I should be considered, or what do I need to do here to get that raise? That is not culturally acceptable in other countries. So when I meet someone with similar identity, I try to share that here we need to learn to do that, which is, it probably wasn't accepted in our home or workplace back home, but it is the norm here.
It is here. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm from Nigeria, and I told somebody that it took me a while to realize that part of why we also didn't need to celebrate ourselves was because back home, our communities will celebrate us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like your neighbors, your church, your community.
Yes.
You didn't need to celebrate yourself. You keep quiet, you do your work, and people will lift you up.
Will notice. And yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now we are coming to this new space where nobody really knows you. And I think a lot of times the culture is very different. Everybody's trying to promote themselves. So we have to understand that.
And it feels a certain way when you're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all need to develop, and when something is unfamiliar, as long as we are aligned with our values, we can develop that skill as well. So is it easy to talk about ourselves? No, but can we learn? Absolutely. Should we learn? Yes.
Yeah. So I didn't get into LinkedIn and posting about the things I'm doing until I became an entrepreneur. I remember the very first time I posted on LinkedIn, I was so nervous. And then, fast forward a couple of years, somebody made a comment saying, oh, and you do a good job. You're so good at promoting yourself. And I remembered feeling so triggered. Like, that sounds like you're calling me out, like I did something bad. And the person was giving me a compliment. But it felt so awkward, like, oh my gosh, somebody thinks I'm good at promoting myself. That feels wrong.
Yes. Oh, I relate 100% to that comment too.
Yeah. All right, Adriana, let's get to know about your journey a little bit. I shared a little bit about what you do, but can you walk us back through your career path, and maybe you want to highlight some of the key milestones on your journey that led to where you are today?
Thank you. Yes. So I started my career in human resources back in Colombia. And when I moved to Massachusetts, I wanted to do my MBA. I wanted to learn English. And while the plan wasn't to stay here, things change. And I ended up having to pivot my career. And the first job I found was actually at a cell phone store. I had to, sell cell phones. That was my very first job. And I always like to share that story, because even though it wasn't in human resources, it wasn't doing what I love, I seized that opportunity. I really gave it my best, and I was grateful for having it. And then one particular day, a gentleman came to buy a phone. I was in charge of helping people that spoke Spanish, and he didn't. But there was a long line on, the side that spoke English. So I said, I can help you. I'm not completely fluent, but I'm happy to help you if you want me to. And then he said yes. He bought like 5 lines, which it was a big sell day for me. But more importantly, he liked the way I helped him. And he said, I have a company and I'm looking for bilingual recruiters.
Oh,
Would you be
wow.
interested? I could not believe it. And that transaction led me back to my HR journey that I really was passionate about.
Wow.
And it was just fascinating. So
That is amazing. Yeah.
yes. And I think even that level of gratitude when you have a job and you do your best, even if it's not the thing you love to do,
Mhm.
other opportunities will show up. So I will always be grateful for that gentleman that gave me a chance to go back into HR. And then from there, I stayed with that company for a few years. And then I went to a drug testing laboratory. And that's at the laboratory, that's the place where my career really evolved and mature, because I started handling the HR function, but the president allowed me to learn other areas of the organization. So
Mhm.
I had my own P&L plan. I started opening territories. I went to DC and Maryland and Chicago and Maine. So I started traveling and really developing myself as a leader. And it was a very interesting combination of putting in place what I knew while simultaneously learning everything I didn't know, all the compliance I didn't know, all the financial background that I didn't have, all the it was a clinical laboratory, so I had to learn how to communicate with insurance companies and hospitals.
Mhm.
So I think that position really gave me a level of maturity and many other capabilities that I didn't have. And I will always be grateful for that gentleman, that CEO that said, even though it's not your expertise, why don't you go and open a territory? Why don't you go and
Mm.
negotiate rates with Blue Cross Blue Shield? So he really allowed me to explore possibilities. And I think that level of trust is what allows an individual to develop potential that sometimes we don't even know we have until
Right.
someone else sees that in us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thankful for people that take the time to notice other people, right? To notice
Right.
and invest and sponsor people. Because I was just having a conversation about that, well, not every manager has the skill to be a good coach and mentor and sponsor. But when we do find one or two people that see us, they see us, which is why they take that chance, right? Because
Yes.
sometimes as an immigrant, it's very we don't see ourselves the way other people see us, and we're just working hard. And sometimes you work hard and you get stuck. But it
Right.
takes one person seeing you and offering the next level of opportunity.
And I love to say, as we get to a level of maturity, we can be that person to someone
Someone else.
else.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, we have to keep doing that as we're moving along because we're not going to stop learning. We're not going to stop like reaching for the next level. But there are other people that can already learn so much from
Right.
our journey as well. Thank you. All right. So maybe talk a little bit about the work that you do now before I sort of ask about that layer of, and maybe the layer is part of it. How do you think um, some of that, your identity background and who you are, how do you think it's shaped the choices that you have made in your career so far?
I think there is always a moment when you realize that what was one day a limitation can become a strength. And I do think in my work, in my line of work, or at least when I'm connecting to groups that are diverse, and every person might have a different background. Maybe we don't need to have boxes that we check to have in common with someone, but I think the skill of understanding their perspective and how we can both experience the same situation, but our reality might be completely different depending on our identity. I think that knowledge or that ability to understand and stop sort of like generalizing judgments, that curiosity to understand why someone is behaving in a particular way in the workplace. I think that skill is something that I love to bring to workplaces, because it's not, it's not emotionally driven, or maybe it's not being led by drama. It's really being led by data. We all have different components that determine who we are, and if we understand how psychologically that can affect a person, or even how our reactions are perceived by everyone else, I think that changes the quality of the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe that's feeding into culture redesign. Is that what you're?
Yes. So what I do with culture redesign, we have an assessment. So we help organizations evolve their culture maturity level. So we talk about capability, competence, and capacity. And we explain that for a manager to be functioning, or a people leader to be functioning at a high level, is not only knowing the competence or having the capability to do something, but it's also about having the capacity to do it. So emotional capacity, physical capacity, the appropriate language, and the ability to connect. I don't know if you've ever experienced the leaders that talk about feedback or emotional intelligence, but they don't know how to give feedback or practice emotional intelligence. So all these concepts, sometimes people have the notion, but they don't know what that looks like in practice. And they also don't know how to personalize it, because if I'm giving feedback, might look very different than if you're giving feedback. And maybe we both can do it proficiently, but it definitely looks different until you start putting in the reps and developing that muscle of how to give feedback. And that's really what I do. We have identified different capabilities that are vital for people leaders, and then we support them on developing those capabilities in a way that feels good to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I definitely can see how your own experience can shape these, but I want to learn more about that. How did you move from being, a leader within an organization to starting these? What part of what caused that shift? What initiated it?
Yes, thank you for that question. I love to share that part. I think when you work in human resources, or even as a business owners, a lot of things are nice to have, and culture becomes one of those that are like, oh, that would be nice to work on culture, but it's usually never urgent, right? Like compliance is urgent, benefits are urgent, open enrollment is urgent, pay rates are urgent, raises, people you need to fire and hire, all of that is usually a priority. And then culture becomes something that you will do later. And after being in that HR role for years, I realized, I want to be the resource for people and businesses that really care about culture, but don't have the bandwidth to work on it. And that's how I decided to start my business. And then that evolved into a long data collection process and research project until we were able to validate the capabilities we work on today, and really kind of like put together the solutions we offer companies, whether they have a team of 3 or a team of 3,000. The solution is different, but we have identified what is critical at different stages in a business. So that's how I got started. I wanted to be the person I couldn't be when I was working internally.
And I think talking about culture, I think that's one of those things where it's not a priority. You are not working on it, but it's being shaped. Your culture is happening.
It exists.
It exists.
Yes, it exists.
And when
So
you're
you
not
might
intentional about it.
Yes.
it's shaping to be however it wants. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think one of those lessons that I learned with culture is you can have the best language on the website, and you can have the values on the walls, and you can have all your poetry everywhere, but if you don't have what I call the plumbing, right, like the systems that lead to delivering those values, employees don't experience what you have on the wall. The reality becomes very different than what you are projecting. So
Yes.
yes, you said something great about culture. You might as well be intentional, because if you're not intentional, it doesn't mean, oh, it's going to default to the poster. Absolutely not. It's going to default to the behaviors you tolerate.
Yeah.
So yes, I always tell people, if you think culture is not important, look at your employee retention, you look at your employee engagement, look at your internal promotions. That is culture as well.
This culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I, for those listening, I already know Adriana and I are going to have a whole deep dive conversation on the work she does, because I can see that overlap, and I would love to really get into that, with what I'm seeing in my B2B work, with companies trying to build communities for minorities, and just the challenge with trying to get them to come up and look at the big picture. You
Oh,
think
I
you're
love
trying to
that.
solve
Yes.
for these, they bring you in to do these about ERGs, and I'm like, this is a sign of something else. You need to zoom out
Yes.
and take a
Oh,
look.
I love that. Thank you for doing that work. I feel like a lot of times we end up being put in this box. And there, I remember when my book first came out, someone said, well, do you want to be the first Latina with a book that reached whatever level best-selling in Amazon? And I was looking at the question and thinking, I want to be a best-selling author regardless of who I am, right? Like I just want to be in that category.
Right.
I don't want another smaller category made just for me.
Mhm.
I want to be part of the grown up category here.
Yeah.
Yes, don't make another
Well,
category just for
yeah.
me. Yes,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and the first, I think the most important thing about being highlighted for the first is something that we talked about, is that opening the door for other people to see that it's possible,
right,
right?
right,
So
right.
that's the way, because I also struggle with all the first person doing this, the first person doing that, and I'm like, what is the value in that? But I think the intent behind that,
Yes.
is, if we embrace that, maybe we'll feel a little less awkward.
Yes, I think it's almost like a coin, right? You have to look at both sides. So yes, we want to be an example for the upcoming generations, of course. And is it possible? Yes. And also, we can be part of the general category as well.
Yes.
I think sometimes, like with this, all the groups and all the mother working mothers, and all these subgroups,
Mhm.
and then I think it's okay to find identity and connection. But in terms of, for example, business development, most of my clients are not from any of those groups. So if I want to develop my business, I also have to show up in rooms where I'm the only person that looks and sounds like me, and
Yeah.
that's okay. So you need to sort of develop that courage. Otherwise, every time I show up to the Latina businesswoman, I am very comfortable there. But
Right.
guess what? I also need to develop that comfort in a group where I'm still the only one, so
Right.
that other people will start showing up there.
Showing up. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, as we kind of move towards the end and the final part of our conversation, I want to ask a little bit more of advice based on your own journey for anyone that is listening. So, drawing from your experience, and your own life story and journey, what advice and guidance will you offer to leaders? First, maybe we'll do it in two parts. First, leaders, who are within organizations and are trying to, they have good intent,
Yes.
And they're trying to, whether they're part of a minority group or not, they're trying to really make an impact for their employees. What advice will you give them? And then the second side of that will be for anyone that can relate with you. Maybe he's from the same country, maybe he's an immigrant or a mom or HR, right? And they are also trying to figure out their career now. What are some of the things you would tell them that they should do in order to advance their career?
Thank you. Thank you for those two questions because they're thoughtful. And I want to start with the second part. And anyone, maybe a mom or an immigrant, I will say my advice will be don't let someone else put limitations on your future. Because I think I was in rooms where maybe with a good intention, I remember someone that told me once, well, you're a working mother and like you just can't apply for that job. Like you need to, I remember he said, you need to relax, maybe go take a yoga class. And I know he meant he came from a good place, but I want to say to anyone listening, don't let someone else tell you what your limitations are. If you think you want to do more and you're capable of more, even if you're not ready for more, start developing yourself so that you can get there. So believe your inner voice and not the good intended, thoughts of someone else that doesn't know your potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for
And
that.
and then in the workplace, like the second part, I will say to leaders, and it's almost like the same advice, only for different people. I think we tend to believe that we know what someone else needs. So when we are leading a team or when we are developing, I think we should think more about asking questions and listening to see what they really want. Because maybe I want someone to become a great salesperson, but they're not interested in sales. So instead of letting our own assumptions about an individual guide their developmental journey, we should be curious. And instead of letting our own biases dictate, this is what's best for that person, we should ask questions, and we can practice curiosity and let the other person kind of like guide that journey so that it can be really a collaboration.
Yeah. And the result is often way better than either of us could have
Yes. Yes.
individually planned, right?
Right. Yes.
Because you bring an experienced lens, and then this person also brings their lived realities and their own dreams and personal goals.
Right.
And so working together is definitely going to be a good outcome. There are leaders talking about, HR talent development that will talk about, we offer 20 things. We do this at our organization. Why do the employees still complain?
Yes.
Sometimes you can do 20 of the wrong things or the things that are not
Right.
important to your people, right? Are you
Yes.
listening? Are you listening
Yes.
to them to find out the one thing you might be able to do differently that will go a long way than doing 20 things that nobody cares about?
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. I love hearing about your story, your journey, and your insights. Anything before I have a final question that I like to use to wrap up. But before I go to that, anything you want to share with my audience, maybe about your work or about what you are doing now?
Yes, I would love to share the fact that my story, when I share it, it makes me vulnerable. And initially I wasn't sort of comfortable, but I have found a lot of strength in that vulnerability. And I did not expect that. So for any person kind of like feeling a little vulnerable about their upbringing or their journey, I want to share that once you lean into who you are, there is a magical strength that you will find on the other side of vulnerability. So lean into it.
Thank you. That is so beautiful. That's such a great place to learn this, because you're right. Our stories are powerful, and you won't realize until you start how much you
Right.
get strength from it. Thank you,
Yes.
Adriana.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me and for creating this type of space.
I love it, and I love, especially because most of my guests are not people that I know personally, and I know the level where you are now, the things you are doing, and I love to just help people humanize some of these experiences and hopefully inspire somebody else to take that bold step as well on their career. So thank you for sharing. All right. So my final question is a fun one, and it's about food.
Okay.
If you were to share a dish from your home, your culture, your family with your co-workers, what would you pick and why?
I will bring empanadas, and I'm gonna tell you why. Even though I don't, I'm not good at making them, so they will be bought at a Colombian restaurant. I like that you can take little bites and talk. So it's a great food to be shared while having conversation. Like you're not so engaged in your full meal that you cannot have a conversation. And two, I think I like the fact that there is crunchiness outside but softness inside, just like humans. So I usually like to see when I'm doing coaching, I like to talk about what's inside, not only what we're projecting and how we want to be perceived, but let's talk about what's inside. And that's kind of like, if we look at an empanada, the whole like thing is what's inside. Is it sweet? Is it chicken? Is it saucy? Like what's
Yeah.
inside?
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love listening to how people respond to this question and then tying it back to what you just shared. The Where all these physical layers of what you see, but you don't really know what's inside until you
Right.
spend time. You take a bite, you take another bite. And that's really the goal of human connection and culture and everything you talked about is, you can't please 100 employees the exact same way, right? But when you
Right.
take a moment to know people, to listen, when people know you care, we're always able to find connection with each other, even in the
Right.
workplace. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now I'm not going to look at empanadas the same way again.
Nice.
Crunchy on the outside, but sweet. It's such a good food to explain that concept.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that, Adriana. It was so lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Thank you for joining us. Please don't forget to rate and review the episodes. We have the videos on YouTube, but we also have the audios on Spotify, Amazon Audible. Please review and share with your colleagues, your boss, anyone that needs to be aware of some of these conversations. Until next time, it's been Thriving in Intersectionality. Thank you.